you very much, Pete. Loud and clear now. I am John Arnette. This is the Social Gambler Radio Hour. We are brought to you by thesocialgambler.com, your leader in free sports picks, news, and reviews. Plenty of fresh content, free as always, on the Social Gambler today. We'll get to some of it here in a little bit. Got a lot to talk about today, a lot going on in the sports world. If you'd like to join the show, 794-9001 is how you do that, 794-9001. Major League Baseball All-Star Game last night. Don't know if you saw it. I saw most of it. Really wasn't much of a game. After the first inning, National League scoring 5 runs off Justin Verlander in the first inning. American League could only manage 6 hits the entire game. 6 hits and no runs for the American League. The National League pitching staff, guys like Matt Cain, Steven Strasburg, R.A. Dickey, Aroldis Chapman, really shut down the American League, making for a mostly dry and boring game. 8-0, the final score. San Francisco Giants outfielder Melky Cabrera named the MVP, 2 hits plus a home run for Cabrera. I guess the most interesting thing about the whole night from my perspective, Chipper Jones, of course, Chipper Jones from this area, played high school ball in this area. 40 years old now, has had an outstanding Hall of Fame career with the Atlanta Braves, playing his final All-Star game. Hit a single in his final All-Star at bat. Apparently, he gave a emotional speech to his fellow players before the game. So, Chipper Jones, he's been on sort of his farewell tour this year. I'm not sure if I like, hey, who am I to say? Chipper Jones, he's been in there long enough. He deserves a farewell tour if he wants one. But, he's gone in other ballparks, opposing ballparks, and they've given him awards, and everybody's clapped for him and things like that. Not sure. Isn't there some honor in sort of playing hard, not making a big show of it, and then at the end of the season retiring? Like I said, though, I guess Chipper Jones earned the right to do whatever he wants that way. Major League Baseball now moves on to its second half of the season, and if they want time in the spotlight, if they want to be the number one subject talked about around the country in sports talk programs like this, they better hurry up. They got 2 or 3 weeks, because 2 weeks from tomorrow, NFL training camps start, including right here in Jacksonville. NFL training camps start around the country. And we've talked about this is one of the last dead times in the NFL news cycle. Once training camps start, their daily NFL stories, from injuries to how this player's looking, how that player's looking, holdouts, the whole deal. Now, could be said that even right now as we speak, Major League Baseball is not in the spotlight, is not the biggest thing being talked about, because NBA free agency has been on the tip of everybody's tongue here for the last couple of weeks. A lot of things have gone on. The Dwight Howard saga continues with another twist today. We talk about this every day because there's something else to talk about every day. Apparently, 2 hours ago, it was reported that the Nets issued an ultimatum to Howard saying it was today or never. If they couldn't get something done with the Magic, find a third team to facilitate the trade, whatever they had to do, it had to be done today or they were going to move on. Within about 15 minutes before we went on the air here, it was reported that the Nets have apparently moved on. They have discontinued their pursuit of Dwight Howard, which puts Howard in a little bit of an awkward position, because he said publicly just a week or so ago there was only one team he would consider re-signing with long-term. That one team, the Brooklyn Nets, the team that's now discontinued their pursuit. So I don't know what Howard's going to do now. Guess he's going to have to open his mind to playing somewhere else for several years. What are the Magic going to do now? Because there was one team, the Nets, who were already established as serious suitors for Howard. They we don't want to say desperately wanted him, because we don't know, but clearly wanted him, and why wouldn't you? He's the best center in the NBA. Other teams, the Magic aren't going to be able to get as much from other teams, not without an assurance from Howard that he's going to re-sign in those cities. Because right now, if you're the Houston Rockets, if you're the LA Lakers, who are two other teams who are being talked about as potential trade partners for the Magic, you're viewing Howard as basically a one-year rental. I mean, yeah, you might be able to talk him into it. You might be able to convince him to stay for several more years. Ask Orlando how it is dealing with that situation, with that ongoing situation. You don't want to get a guy who is only intending on staying there 1 year and then he'll get to hit free agency. And that might be what you're dealing with if you're one of these other teams, if you're the Rockets, if you're the Lakers. Now, that doesn't mean they wouldn't consider it. A team like the Rockets, for example, even if they got him for a one-year rental, Houston Rockets aren't creating any buzz now. They're not contenders right now. A lot of young players. I mentioned it a few days ago on the show, but if the Houston Rockets don't get Dwight Howard, which they've been this looked like they've had an outside chance at best until here in the last few minutes, half hour, now that we've learned that he's definitely not going to the Nets. I think everybody, myself included, thought eventually he was going to end up with the Brooklyn Nets. They wanted him. He wanted to go there, said that was the only team he'd re-sign with. So now that we're sort of learning to live with this new reality that's just hit us the last hour or so, that he will not be with the New Jersey Nets, maybe Houston's a viable possibility. Now, if they do not get Howard, I do not know what they are doing. Their general manager, Daryl Morey, when you look at some of the moves he's made this offseason, as of last Sunday, and they've made a couple of moves since last Sunday, trading Marcus Camby for draft picks, let Marcus Camby go to the Knicks. I'm sorry, they got a couple other guys aside from draft picks. Tony Douglas, former Florida State guard, sort of a guy who's a two-guard, showed he wasn't capable of playing the point last year with the Knicks, but if you looked at the Houston Rockets roster last Sunday, which I did, they had 0 point guards on their roster and 9 forwards. 9 players listed as forward on the Houston Rockets roster, 0 point guards. I mean, they have so many guys who play the same position. They have so many small forward type guys who could play power forward maybe slightly undersized for power forward. Let me read off some of them to you. How about a couple of draft picks this year? Royce White, Terrence Jones. How about Chandler Parsons? Had a good rookie year for him, former Florida Gator. How about Luis Scola? How about Patrick Patterson? Forgot about him, didn't you? I mean, that's 5. They acquired John Brockman and John Lauer, however you say it, from the Milwaukee Bucks this offseason. And the thing is, I mean, I'm not reading these off a sheet of paper. I just happen to remember it from going through the list the other day. If I wanted to, I could flip back through this notebook I have here and find them. I'm missing a couple. I mean, I'm leaving out a couple. All those guys I've named, they basically play the same position. So they're going to have to move some of these guys, right? Get some guards in there. I mean, they've got Kevin Martin, an excellent shooting guard. Now they've got a backup shooting guard in Tony Douglas. But they had 2 good point guards, Kyle Lowry, Goran Dragic. Let them both get away this offseason. They had 2 viable NBA centers, Samuel Dalembert, Marcus Camby. Don't have either one of them anymore. So Houston Rockets, if they're not able to land Dwight Howard, I'm sure Houston fans are going to be scratching their head over just what Daryl Morey is doing. Now, as far as the Nets go, they're prepared to move on apparently without Dwight Howard. I think they're going to be just fine with what they have. The team of Deron Williams, Joe Johnson, Gerald Wallace at the small forward, Brook Lopez at center. Now they're going to get to keep some guys like Marshawn Brooks, the key reserve guard, that they're going to have to give up in the Howard trade. The Nets are still going to be tough, man. If you don't believe me, I'm not sure a lot of people are really fully aware of Nash trade. The Steve Nash has got a lot of publicity. Steve Nash is not near the player Deron Williams is at this point in their careers. Not even close. Deron Williams, a much better player. Much better. So, you know, this guy, I mean, the only people you could argue are better than Deron Williams as far as point guards in the league. What, Rajon Rondo, Chris Paul, maybe Russell Westbrook, even though, no, Deron Williams is better than Russell Westbrook, I believe. Maybe a guy like Tony Parker, an underrated guy like that, but he is in that class. the elite of the elite in terms of NBA point guards. Joe Johnson, another underrated guy. Because he's been playing in obscurity in Atlanta for most of his career, spent some time in Phoenix, and I believe he was drafted by Boston, but spent most of his time in Phoenix and Atlanta. He's just been going along, putting up stats, 20-plus points a game for years, basically unnoticed. You look at a guy like Dwayne Wade, who gets so much more publicity than Joe Johnson, so much more praise. Heard in this year's finals, before they had won this year's finals. Obviously, I know that was Dwayne Wade's second finals. He won one back several years ago with Shaq. But I heard someone in the finals say Dwayne Wade was a surefire first-ballot Hall of Famer. And I thought for a second, I said, really? Because, he's been injured a lot. I know he's a nice player, but it's not like he's ever been a guy who leads the league in scoring or perennial favorite for MVP or anything like that. I mean, Dwayne Wade's been a nice player, but surefire first-ballot Hall of Famer. When you look at the careers, when you look at the numbers of a guy like Joe Johnson and Dwayne Wade, I'm not sure Dwayne Wade is better. And I guarantee you, Joe Johnson is thinking that same thing and has thought that many a times, sitting there at SportsCenter watching Dwayne Wade's teams play in the finals. Well, he's playing with LeBron James and Shaquille O'Neal. Joe Johnson surrounded by, Zaza Pachulia, Jeff Teague. Now, I know the Hawks have had a couple of good teams here these last couple of years, but Joe Johnson's going to get a chance to show the world now. He's an elite guy. The Nets are going to be strong. Apparently today, their general manager, Billy King, is meeting with Brook Lopez's agent, trying to get something done now that they're not going after Howard, trying to lock up Lopez into a long-term deal. Now, the reason, and who knows if this is bluffing from Brook Lopez's agent or what. And Brook Lopez, you haven't seen him play. He's a nice player, sort of an offensive-oriented center. I believe he averaged close to 20 a game last year. Played at Stanford with his twin brother, who plays out at Phoenix. Actually, I don't think his twin brother's name is Robin. I don't think it's his twin. For some reason, I think Robin might be a year or two younger. Got the big crazy hair. Doesn't play as much offense as Brook, but is a better rebounder and defender. Brook might be a little soft, but anyway, apparently the Charlotte Bobcats were prepared. Brook is a restricted free agent. They're prepared to offer him a max deal. $20 million, whatever a max deal is now in the NBA. So that's why the Nets are rushing to get him signed today, so Charlotte doesn't have that chance to sign him to an offer sheet. If you're the Bobcats, doesn't that pretty much say it all about the Bobcats and the state of their organization? You're signing Brook Lopez to a max deal? Is that the right idea? He's a nice player, but a complimentary piece, right? Anyway, the NBA free agency pot continues to stir. It will all cool and settle down as soon as this Dwight Howard situation is resolved. And all parties concerned want it resolved quickly. You think Magic general manager Rob Hennigan, new general manager, you think he wants this on his plate? No, he wants to be worried about setting up his coaching staff, putting his team together. The NBA summer leagues have already started back. As crazy as this is to think about, we're less than 10 weeks from the start of NBA training camp. It doesn't even sound right, does it, Pete? Yeah, right?
Sounds good, though.
Yeah, so anyway, Pete is not as enthusiastic about the NBA as NFL football, and I think a lot of people follow right in line with him. But that's okay. God knows we hardly talk any NBA when the season is starting. Believe me, when the season rolls around in late September, October, we might get to 5 minutes a day, but that won't be the primary topic of conversation. Other free agency news caught my eye was announced today. Miami Heat, in addition to signing Ray Allen, they've come to terms with Rashard Lewis. Rashard Lewis, who you think of as old because he's been in the league forever. Of course, really, the peak of his career was when he was on that 2009 Orlando Magic team that ended up reaching the NBA Finals. But Rashard Lewis is only 32 years old. He signed a big deal after that 2009 season and has been in sort of NBA purgatory in Washington, playing for a brutal Washington Wizards team the last couple of years. Wizards dealt him to the New Orleans Hornets last month. New Orleans bought out his contract for $13 million. So Rashard Lewis, and it's another example of this, and You see a lot of veteran players. Mike Miller was an example of this last year. Ray Allen just last week. They signed with the Miami Heat. They signed with teams like this, who they think are going to be contending teams, for significantly less money and significantly less playing time, less of a role. I mean, Rashard Lewis agreed to terms with the Heat. 2 years, $2.6 million. He's going to be making $1 million a year. He just had a huge $100 million contract. I mean, the Hornets bought out his contract for $13 million, bought out what was remaining on it. So, I get that, hey, it's probably nice to play in the NBA Finals, nice to say you did that, nice to say you won a ring or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, do you want to... Mike Miller, was he a significant contributor to this last year's Miami Heat team? I knew he had a couple games there in the playoffs where he made a few threes. But, come in and be a role player, and to say role player is putting it kindly, to play 10 minutes a game, make a shot here and there, and that's the type of role that Rashard Lewis is looking at. The 3 at Miami is LeBron James, the 4 is Chris Bosh. They got Ray Allen, so they've got a guy who can shoot even better than Rashard Lewis, and shooting, sort of stretching the floor, is what Rashard Lewis is known for. A 6'10 guy who can step outside and shoot. So, here's a guy who's going to play a limited role for not much money, but hey, he'll be living in South Beach, and he'll get to make yearly deep runs into the playoffs. And maybe those things, maybe those are more important than I'm giving him credit for. Obviously, they are. Anyway, do have to go to a quick break now. Before we go, folks, I always tell you that you can find all of your free advice on thesocialgambler.com. And you sure can, but the only place here in Northeast Florida you can legally act on that advice, the only legal sportsbook here in Northeast Florida, is at the Jacks Are Better Casino. The Jacks Are Better, of course, is the casino ship that sails 9 times weekly, Wednesday through Sunday out of Mayport. Full Vegas action out there. They have a non-smoking deck, a smoking deck, and an outdoor area up top. So it's not a lot of the negative stereotypes about casino ships. People say, oh, they're dingy little smoke pits. The Jacks Are Better is not a dingy little smoke pit. It is very nice on the inside, newly renovated. As I said, there is a non-smoking level. Also a smoking level, so smokers concerned about your smokers' rights, there you go. Anyway, be sure to pay him a visit out there. The Jacks Are Better Casino. Only legal sports book in the area. Full Vegas action. Anytime you go out there, be sure to mention this radio show, the Social Gambler Radio Hour, and they will give you $10 in free play. That's right. Just for mentioning the Social Gambler Radio Hour, they'll give you $10 you can use same as cash anywhere in the casino. Got to go to a quick break now. I'll be right back with more of the Social Gambler Radio Hour.
Nothing says love like Italian food, so don't take her to a generic big chain Italian place. Take her to Casa Benedetto, 6357.
Welcome back to the Social Gambler Radio Hour. I'm John Arnette. Good to have you with us today. 794-9001, the number if you'd like to join the program, 794-9001. We are brought to you by thesocialgambler.com, your leader in free sports picks, news, and reviews. Video podcasts of this program now available on thesocialgambler.com. And even though the first 5 or 10 seconds of today's program probably has bad audio, after that, we're good to roll. I forgot to plug in the audio cord yesterday, and 2 days in a row, that would have just been utter incompetence, right? Anyway, we saved it. Of course, there's more than just video podcasts of this program on thesocialgambler.com. Really everything gambling and sports gambling related. They have free picks, news stories, humorous sort of video bits, gambling technology, all your latest news from the gambling industry. TheSocialGambler.com is where you find it all. Now, I want to get into something now that might be a little controversial. Not might be, it is. As a matter of fact, this is sort of a taboo subject to talk about in today's society. But we're going to get into it. I don't care about that. I'm not a big fan of the oversensitivity, that we see so much in society, this I was going to say sensitization. I don't even know if that's a word. I know desensitization's a word. Pete? Any idea there? Yeah, okay. Anyway, the Olympics are approaching. London Games. And really, when you think of the Summer Olympics, the signature event is track. The track and field is a signature event in the Summer Olympics. And when you think about American track stars, if I said to you American track star, not just today, but over the last 20 years, one of the first names going to come to the top of your mind is Michael Johnson. Obviously, Michael Johnson's been retired for several years, but he's the last big-time American track star that we've had. Remember, with the gold shoes, 4-time Olympic gold medalist. Michael Johnson was a legitimate track and field star. Since then, not sure we've had one. I mean, Justin Gatlin, there was the doping allegations and all that, Usain Bolt's certainly a star, but he's Jamaican, of course. Well, anyway, Michael Johnson is making news. He's been making news. Really, this story was reported last week over in England, but just over the last couple of days, it's really made waves around here in this country. And, he's doing a lot of promotional appearances over there. Michael Johnson is in England, doing a lot of promotional stuff for the upcoming 2012 Olympic Games. And he's also promoting a documentary about him and his career. It's called, I don't know what it's called. Michael Johnson, Michael Johnson's Survival of the Fastest. That's what it's called. Well, one of the things that he not only touches on, but feels very strongly about, it's heavily written about in the book, and he's given several speaking engagements talking about that, and that is just why, when we see the 8 finalists in the 100-meter sprint in the Olympics, when we see the medal winners, why are these men black? Why are these men black? And I told you, this is a little bit of a taboo subject. This is not politically correct. And Michael Johnson says that. Michael Johnson is quoted as saying, in fact, this hasn't been discussed openly before. It's a taboo subject in the States, but it is what it is. Why shouldn't we discuss it? And, the concept of, are black people better athletes than white people? Are they faster? Can they jump higher? That's considered racist just to even suggest that. Yet, it's one of those things that, even though it's never spoken, everybody sort of assumes. When you look at these skill positions in something like NFL football, the positions that require the most speed and agility, those are largely occupied by black men. When you look at something like track and field, when you look at the Olympics, say the 100 meters, the final in the 100 meters, that is going to be 8 black men. There's not going to be a single white man who qualifies for that. And so even though it might sound racial or racist to say, well, they must be better athletes, folks, there's a reason for this. And it's not that all black people, all African descendants are better athletes. It's more specific than that. And Michael Johnson goes through it in detail. You see, because of the 8 finalists in the 100 meters in the last Olympics, not only men's finalists in the men's 100 meters, track and field, not only were all 8 of them black, all 8 of them were descendants of slaves. You see, it's not just blacks in general, just descendants of Africa that are dominating these athletic competitions throughout the last few decades. It's specifically descendants of slaves, meaning black people in this country, black people in places like Jamaica, in the Caribbean. And why is that? Why is that? And why can't we talk about that? Now, for exactly what I'm talking about now, Jimmy the Greek, well known, Jimmy the Greek was fired in 1988 from CBS for saying this stuff. Okay, and I guarantee you someone listening out there now is probably uncomfortable with me saying it. But the fact that Michael Johnson, who not only is the Olympic hero, but he is a black man, the fact that he's the one who came out talking about this and thinks it's a subject that should be discussed, I think it makes it newsworthy, and it is newsworthy. Michael Johnson says, quote, "All my life, I believed I became an athlete through my own determination, but it's impossible to think that being descended from slaves hasn't left an imprint through the generations. Difficult as it was to hear, slavery has benefited descendants like me. I believe there's a superior athletic gene in us, end quote. That from Michael Johnson. And this is not completely unsubstantiated now. You know, the fact of the matter is, and in this article, they quote a geneticist, Dr. Rachel Irving. In the 1700s, in the 1600s, when the process of mining slaves from Western Africa was taking place, there were not good conditions on those boats. Lots of people died. As a matter of fact, in one voyage I'm looking at here in 1732, 96% of slaves died on that voyage over. 170 boarded the ship, and 6 walked off. Not only were the biggest and seemingly fittest Africans chosen to come over on the ships, but only the fittest and to survive the journey. You see, to survive the journey, you had to be in some way physically superior to those who didn't. Then when you go on top of that, so what you're getting in the Western Hemisphere, in this country, in the Caribbean, you're getting Africans who are hardy enough to survive the trip over, and then beyond that, once you get here, no disputing that there were a lot of slave owners who were, you know, probably evil people, really is what they did, and they bred the biggest and fastest male slave with the biggest and fastest female slave to try to create bigger, more productive slaves for themselves. And like I said, Michael Johnson, you know, has made a lot of news going on with this, and it's very controversial. This type of thing is what got Jimmy the Greek fired from CBS in 1988, but look at the facts. Look at, and it's what Michael Johnson says, look at the eight finalists in the men's 100 meter in the last Olympics. Look at who the 8 finalists are going to be in this Olympics. They're overwhelmingly going to be descendants of slaves, not black Africans, but descendants of slaves. And Jamaica in particular, it talks about in this article, because Jamaica was the last stop on the slave run. So some of the hardiest men, the people who arrived at Jamaica knew how to survive. So many of them died on the way over. And we have some great Jamaican sprinters. Now, before you go nuts and think I'm pulling this out of the air, again, search for it. You can find it. This is big news. Michael Johnson has been going around London in promotional appearances recently for the London Games. And this is what he's been saying. This is what he's got a documentary made about his life. This is part of it. He mentions this is a taboo subject, and he's correct. It is a taboo subject, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, because recognizing certain truths, there's nothing racist or wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, we know that slavery is a black mark on this society and the society of thousands of other countries around the world who have practiced and still do practice slavery. By the way, in a lot of African nations, slavery is still illegally practiced. It's not completely eradicated from the world. So it's a horrible thing that happened in this country over 200 years ago, but there have been definite results of that, traceable results. I'm not saying good results. I'm not saying they're good. But I'm saying you have to recognize the reality. Why? Why is the black athlete in this country seemingly a little bit generally better athletically than... listen, I'm not saying that all black people are better athletes than all white people. I'm not saying that at all. But you can't deny that there's some truth. What I'm saying is rooted in truth. Look at track teams. Look at the sport of track and field. Look at these skill positions in the NFL. Look at the NBA. It's one of those unspoken truths that everybody sees, but nobody wants to comment on. And so I was impressed to see that Michael Johnson came out and really made this part of his platform. And maybe he's just doing it to stir up controversy, to promote his new documentary, which premiered this week in London. I'm sure that's part of it. But it's something, anytime I see sort of a public figure speaking out and speaking the truth, even though it's something that might not be well received, and he knows good and well that might not be well received, and it's not. I mean, I've read this story in 2 or 3 different places online, and then you go down, as always, I mean, you read the comment board on any site. I mean, it's nothing but drooling idiots mostly, but you read some of the comments, very hostile comments towards Michael Johnson. Perpetrating stereotypes, complete racist. There's nothing different between anybody. Let's think about this. Now, just think about it. I just want you to think about that. The slave traders 200 or 300 years ago, they picked who they thought were the biggest and best and strongest slaves because they thought they'd be the best workers. They came over on arduous journeys. More than half of them died on many of the journeys. So the ones who survived those journeys were seemingly the fittest of the fittest in certain ways. And then once they get over here, you have some slave owners breeding, or if breeding is a dirty word, if that sounds bad, mating their biggest and strongest males, their biggest and strongest females. Now, slavery was in existence in this country for over 200 years, so we're talking of generations of this going on. This didn't just happen once or twice. And it happened in all colonized areas in the Western Hemisphere. Here in North America, all through the Caribbean. And when you look at international competitions, when you look at the black athlete who seems to reign supreme in events like track and field at the Olympics, the vast majority, if not all, as Michael Johnson pointed out, the vast majority, if not all, of those athletes are descended from slaves. They're not only black people, they're descended from, because that's the difference. See, because every black person who has been in this country or has lived in the Caribbean is a descendant from slaves. That's how their family eventually got over here, unless they moved over from Africa in the last 100 years or so. In Africa, that's not necessarily the case. That is why the American black athlete, the Jamaican sprinter, could be superior, has proven to be superior in some international athletic endeavors. And again, if that makes you uncomfortable to hear, if you think I'm venturing too far into the realm of politics instead of sports, I apologize. We will move on out here after this next break, but really caught my eye, Michael Johnson speaking out. And the story that caught my eye was reporting it in a negative way, like, can you believe Michael Johnson said these things? And Michael Johnson, he has no reason to lie about it, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, we're all of mixed heritage. Who knows what's gone on 200 or 300 years ago? No one living now should take any responsibility or should be ashamed or anything like that for what happened 200 or 300 years ago. Nobody was alive. Nobody's parents were alive. Nobody's grandparents were alive. So I think we need to stop being, so sensitive as a country, and certain truths like this should be open for discussion. They're certainly open for discussion on this show. And apparently with Michael Johnson, Olympic legend, world-class sprinter, 4-time Olympic gold medalist, he's not afraid to speak the truth. As I said, we are going to move on here after the break. We do have to go to a quick break now. 794-9001 is the number if you'd like to join the program. Your calls are always welcome. I'm John Arnette, and this is the Social Gambler Radio Hour.
Thanks to all of our loyal customers for voting Carmela's Pizzeria Best Pizza.
My office, I like that. Do you? Welcome back to the Social Gambler Radio Hour. Just found out Pete has an office. What's going on here? Corner view, you got a window?
Oh, I got no windows. They don't give me windows.
No windows?
No. I don't technically have an office. It's a copy room, and I've got a desk in there. It's my desk.
I liked it better when you said that was your office.
Well, yeah, then we'll go with my office.
Yeah, you're going to put a little sign on the door?
Yeah, I will put a little sign on my door. I don't know what it's going to say yet.
Next to a trash can or something like that?
Yeah, the typical one. That's a good one.
Sure. An office, huh? Wow.
That's what I call an office. It's the closest thing I've ever had to an office.
All right.
It is a desk stuck in the copy room, so it's not even permanently mine. People are in and out of it all day long.
All right, well, here you're downplaying it. Off air, he looked at me matter of fact, like, I'll just go in my office and shut the door and whatever. And I was like, oh, your office, huh? I mean, I know this building here is just a labyrinth of doors and different stories and floors and things like that, so there's so many unexplored rooms. Who knows where Pete's office is? You mean it's actually the copy room?
It is the copy room. It's the copy room, yeah.
Hey, that works, man. That works. I like it. I like office better. I always tell the single ladies it's an office. Junior partner in a real estate firm, always a good thing to tell the single ladies. They don't ask too many questions. Anyway, I am John Arnette. This is the Social Gambler Radio Hour, 794-9001, the number if you'd like to get aboard. Talk some sports today, 794-9001. We are brought to you by thesocialgambler.com, your leader in free sports picks, news, and reviews. Lots of fresh, free content on the Social Gambler again today. European sports as well as American sports. They're also an app for your smartphone. So be sure to check them out, thesocialgambler.com. Some college football news that I'm sure caught the attention of fans in this area. Florida State cornerback Greg Reed arrested last night, 11 o'clock outside of Valdosta, Georgia. Driving with a suspended license, marijuana possession.
Hey, John, hang on 1 second, man.
This is Reed's second arrest in less than a year. Was also arrested for obstruction of justice last year. And, Greg Reed, he's a better return guy, better with the ball in his hands than he is in coverage, no question about that. A lot of people have thought of him as sort of a liability in coverage over the last couple of years. But when you look at Florida State's depth chart, and I know Seminole fans know this all too well, I mean, cornerback is one of the spots, one of the maybe points of weakness this year on Florida State's team. I mean, Xavier Rhodes, he's a solid starter on the other side. But if Greg Reed's not available, and believe me, I know some marijuana arrest or whatever, even though it's his second arrest in a year, that ain't going to stop Jimbo Fisher from trotting him out there. So I'm not saying that Greg Reed's not going to be on the team or anything, but if you take him out of the equation, slim pickings in terms of what they're looking at cornerback. Freshman Tyler Hunter, freshman Keelan Smith, sophomore Nick Waysome, who was not very impressive in limited duty last year. Anyway, we are going to go to the phones now. We have John on the line. John, you're on the Social Gambler Radio Hour. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks, John. I was just curious. I watched a little bit of the All-Star game last night, a little bit off subject, I guess, from today's show, but just wondered, does it seem odd to you that home field advantage is determined by that game? Seems like it's almost penalizing to a team that has a great season, and then all of a sudden the guys that didn't even play on their team are determining, home field advantage. So I was just wondering your opinion on that in that game. Seems a little hokey to me, but I don't know if there's any kind of logic behind it.
Well, I agree. Yeah, it's a little hokey, a little Mickey Mouse, whatever word you want to use. No doubt about it. Especially since the Major League All-Star game, it'd be one thing if you're going to make it like that. Okay, try to win the game. Go with your best pitchers at all time. Go with your best lineup. Don't just put in a guy to hit because he hasn't been in the game yet. Especially with the pitchers. I mean, these guys pitch one inning apiece, basically make a cameo appearance, and then they're out the side door until the next pitcher comes in, even if they're dominating. And so, I mean, it is an exhibition. The managers are not out to win the games. And so, yeah, it's almost like making it just a flip of the coin who gets home field advantage. And I think that home field advantage might not be quite as important in baseball as sports like football and basketball. Basketball because of the noise, they're right on top of you. And football because the conditions can change so much depending on where you're playing, one home field to the next. But still, it matters. And I know it was good intentions. I know Bud Selig was trying to make the All-Star game matter, but I'm just not sure. I'm not sure this was a good way to go about it. And I haven't heard nearly anybody say that they like this. I mean, whether it's you, me, or anybody else, national sportscaster, whoever you want, I haven't heard very much support for this idea.
Right. It doesn't seem that fair to the fans either, that finally get a team that's made it, and then they lose a game effectively based on the All-Star game. But
yeah, the best record should have home field advantage, just like every other sport that does it that way, NBA or whatever. I know NFL is a little different because Super Bowl is a neutral site, but the team with the best record should have home field advantage. That's what I believe anyway.
And it seems like I did hear something about maybe the Pro Bowl being changed up to some regard or something with the NFL.
Well, yeah, the NFL tried to eliminate the Pro Bowl. The Players Union was all up in arms, and so now they've announced it's not going to be eliminated, and they're moving it back to Hawaii. So, but who knows?
Gotcha.
Who knows? Yeah, the NFL is not happy with the way the Pro Bowl is, not happy with the level of effort the players put into it. And so in 10 years, there might not be a Pro Bowl. But the players didn't want to see it go away because, it's a good way for them to meet. There's certain clauses in some of their contracts. They get bonuses if they make Pro Bowls. And, so many people are named to Pro Bowl rosters since as soon as somebody pulls out, someone else gets named, that a lot of guys have the opportunity at some point in the NFL career to call themselves a Pro Bowler. And if you eliminate the Pro Bowl, all of a sudden you're just naming all pro teams, that might be 2 or 3 deep, and that takes a lot of those guys out of the equation. The David Garrards of the world, who can always say he's a Pro Bowler, but if there weren't an actual Pro Bowl and they were just putting out rosters, all pro teams, say 3 deep, he would have never been on one of those teams.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot. Enjoying the show as always. Have a good day.
Hey, I appreciate the call.
Okay. Bye-bye.
I'm going to go back to the phones. Got Arnold on the line now. Arnold, you're on the Social Gambler Radio Hour. How are you?
Fine. Commenting on your of what he said, I think, first of all, he hasn't been the kind of athlete that tries to get attention or accolade through the press or through any pranks or anything like that. So I think he was not trying to promote any kind of, I don't think there was a self-gratifying message in this or trying to get attention on himself. I think, like you sort of alluded to, I think he's stating what he feels to be fact. It's certainly interesting, and anybody listening to the show, anybody would certainly admit and know that slavery is a black mark on society's. It's not talking about it, isn't endorsing it. Slavery in itself is awful, but I think it's really interesting how he, mentioned what he considers an obvious truth, and I sort of applaud you and your radio show for sort of noticing that, because I've listened to sports talk all day and I haven't heard it mentioned until now. And
I think it's interesting and newsworthy. Now, I'm not surprised that you haven't heard it mentioned anywhere else, because it's the type of thing that's very taboo. People get angry even talking about it. But you're right. And if you don't know what Arnold's talking about, if you weren't listening to the last segment, Michael Johnson, 4-time Olympic gold medal sprinter, has come out with some controversial comments. Some people think they're controversial about why the black athlete who is descended from slaves, meaning the black athlete in this country and in the Caribbean, seems to be athletically superior to Caucasians, Asians, and blacks who did not descend from slaves. Johnson lays it all out, lays out his evidence, mentions how he knows it's taboo, talks about how the sort of biggest, strongest slaves were picked out by the slave owners to be brought over to this country. A very arduous journey. A lot of them died, so only the sort of fittest were able to survive. And then once they got over here, some of the biggest and fastest men biggest and strongest men were matched up with the biggest and strongest females. And so over 200 years, that has created the end result of, just like Michael Johnson pointed out, the last Olympic Games, the 8 finalists in the men's 100-meter dash, all 8 descendants from slaves. And it's going to be the same case this year. And so while people, and I appreciate your call, Arnold. Appreciate you pointing that out. But yeah, so people might not want to talk about it. It might be sort of taboo, politically incorrect to talk about, but it's an obvious truth in society. A kid, an innocent kid who doesn't know what racism is, doesn't know one thing better from another. He might say, "Daddy, how come there are more black people playing in the NBA? Daddy, how come more cornerbacks in the NFL appear to be black people?" There are reasons for this. And it is not racist of you to point out what those reasons may be. And the funny thing is, if Michael Jackson, I keep calling him Michael Jackson, if Michael Johnson had not been the one to publish this and to come out with this, or publish it to say this, I probably wouldn't be talking about it now. Because if a white person had been the originator of these comments, and then I were to report them, then that might come across as racist to some people. But the fact that Michael Johnson is a black man is a descendant of a slave, and for part of his documentary, he had a DNA test done showing that indeed he's descendant from West Africa, which is where, of course, the slaves were brought over to this country from. So it's just one of the facts of living here in America. You know, it's not an illusion. There's a reason why there's so many seemingly really good black athletes. And when you say athletes, you know what I'm talking about, running and jumping. There's a reason for that. A genetic reason. Jimmy the Greek was fired for it in 1988. Michael Johnson not being praised for coming out with it now, but at least since he himself is an athlete, since he himself is a black man, I think people might listen to him. But anyway,
right.
Appreciate the call, Arnold.
Good. Yep.
Wanted to move on. Wanted to mention, before we got out of here, something that caught my eye. College football news. Talked about Greg Reed being arrested. That's significant news for Florida State fans. But to me, something that I haven't heard talked about yet. But if this happened, this could really stir up some emotions among college football fans. Apparently, according to CBS Sports, the BCS playoffs, which will be coming in 2014, the 4-team playoff, college football playoff that we're going to get, they're going to have an academic component. An academic component. What exactly does that mean? I'm not really sure, to be quite honest with you.
Social gambler, so who's this?
A lot of people suggested that the academic progress reports, which are currently used by the NCAA, UConn basketball, I know, has already been sanctioned for scoring too low in the academic progress reports. A lot of people think that if it's close between two teams for the third or fourth spot, whoever has the higher score in these academic progress reports might get the nod. I mean, imagine that. Imagine if you're a fan of a school and you get bumped out for the fourth seed because your school didn't score high enough. And it's not even just football players. They take into consideration the academics of the entire athletic department. So this could be very controversial if it happens. I'm going to take one more call today. We have Glenn on the line. Glenn, you're on the Social Gambler Radio Hour. How are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing well. Listen, I just tuned in and I heard you mention that Greg Reed got arrested.
Yeah, that's correct. Greg Reed was arrested at 11 o'clock last night, driving with a suspended license and possession of marijuana.
That's his second arrest, isn't it?
Yeah, that's his second arrest in less than a year. But no worries, Seminole fans. Like I said, unlike the situation that Mark Richt had at Georgia, where he had 2 5-stars who will be able to fill the shoes of Isaiah Crowell quite nicely, the Seminoles are pretty thin at cornerback behind Reed and Xavier Nixon, their starter at the other side. Xavier Nixon. Xavier, slips to the top of my head. Help me out here. Xavier Rhodes. Xavier Nixon, the Florida left tackle. Behind Greg Reed and Xavier Rhodes, they've got 2 freshmen and a sophomore. And so because of that lack of depth, I'd be very surprised if Jimbo Fisher were to do something that most would consider extreme, like kicking him off the team. Now, whether that's...
So he's going to take the Urban Meyer approach to coaching the team.
Exactly. You might have heard, I thought it was humorous, the story that broke a few days ago, Urban Meyer kicking linebacker Storm Klein off of Ohio State's team, senior linebacker. And I was like, wow, that's something. And then I read the story, and when you read the complete story, at the very bottom it says, if there are any changes in the charges, we'll reevaluate his status. Yeah, okay. I see it now. It's the same Chris Rainey situation. Once those charges are pleaded down to a misdemeanor, they'll be back on the field.
Well, that Greg Reed's one hell of a player, and I'm a Miami fan, so I wouldn't mind seeing him out for the year.
Yeah, heck of a player, especially good punt returner, especially good with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, he sure is.
Can really make things happen. Well, anyway, appreciate the call, Glenn.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, if I was a Florida State fan, they might sit him out for the Little Sisters of the Poor game, Prairie View A&M, whoever they're going to play. Seriously doubt he'll be missing any significant time, especially because I don't think either one of these charges are felonies. Still notable, Greg Reed was arrested last night. Something I wanted to mention yesterday, didn't quite get to it. Going to throw it in here now. Did you see where a local woman, 59-year-old Lynn Mobley, made 2 holes in 1 in the same round last Friday at Cimarron on number 2 and 11? What are the odds on that happening? 67 million to 1. What about that? Out of time now. I'll be back with more at 4
St.
tomorrow.
John's and Flagler County's destination for sports on the radio, ESPN 14.